Nathaniel Lee's hands were covered in grease when the black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up with a soft hiss of brakes and a wickedly flat front tire, and he hadn't even finished changing the one on his beat-up Toyota yet. "Daddy, that car looks like a spaceship," Rowan chirped from the back seat, his 7-year-old voice muffled through the cracked window. Nathaniel wiped his hands on his jeans, glancing toward the idling car. It parked awkwardly near the edge of the gas station parking lot, close enough for him to hear the hiss of the punctured tire. The driver's side door swung open, and out stepped a woman in heels too nice for this neighborhood and a pencil skirt that didn't belong within 10 miles of a dollar store. She stood there, staring at the tire like it had personally insulted her. Nathaniel didn't recognize her, and he would have remembered a face like that: sharp cheekbones, full lips, and eyes the color of golden honey. She looked completely out of place, like she belonged on a red carpet, not in a forgotten corner of small-town Kentucky. He looked at Rowan again. "Stay in the car, buddy. I'll be right over there." Rowan gave a thumbs up, munching loudly on the last of his peanut butter crackers. Nathaniel walked over, tugging his cap lower. "You need a hand." The woman turned, surprised. She looked him over grease-stained shirt, beat-up boots and all. "You know how to fix a tire?" she asked, skeptical but not rude. He grinned. "Ma'am, I could probably do it blindfolded." She laughed softly, a kind of surprised sound, and stepped aside. "Be my guest. I don't even know where the spare is." Nathaniel got to work. Her trunk was spotless, and the tools looked brand new, probably never touched. The spare was pristine. He crouched down, loosening the lug nuts with practiced ease. "I'm Nathaniel, by the way," he said over his shoulder. "Mara," she replied. "Mara Finley." "Mara," he repeated, liking the way it sounded. "You're not from around here, are you?" "No," she said with a small laugh. "Just passing through. My GPS took me off the interstate. I was trying to avoid traffic. Didn't expect a flat tire in the middle of nowhere." "Well, welcome to nowhere." He tightened the final lug nut, stood up, and wiped his hands again. "You're good to go." Mara looked at the car, then at him. "You didn't have to do that." "Wasn't gonna let you stand out here alone. Besides, my kid's watching. Gotta set an example." Her expression softened. She glanced toward the Toyota, where Rowan was waving from the window. "That's your son." "Yeah, Rowan, he's 7. Smart as a whip. Loves dinosaurs and grilled cheese." She smiled wide then, and it hit him in the chest. That smile could level a man. "Well, thank you, Nathaniel, really. I would have been stuck here for hours." He shrugged, all in a day's work. She opened her purse and pulled out her wallet. "Let me pay you for your time." Nathaniel stepped back, hands up. "No way, I didn't do it for money." Mara hesitated. She was used to people expecting something, especially when they found out who she was, but he didn't ask. He didn't even flinch at the sight of the car. He just helped. "That's rare," she said quietly. "I'm not rare, just a dad trying to raise a good kid." Mara looked at him for a long second. "Well, thank you." He tipped his head. "You take care out there." She nodded, got in the car, and slowly pulled away. Nathaniel watched the taillights disappear, a strange ache in his chest. She was just passing through, probably headed back to a big city, a big life. The kind of life he could never afford to touch. He didn't know her last name was Finley. Didn't know it was printed on skyscrapers and newspapers and Forbes magazine covers. Didn't know she was worth billions. And Mara, she didn't know she'd just met the one man who didn't want a single thing from her, except maybe 5 more minutes of her time. 3 days later, Mara was still thinking about him. She sat in the backseat of her town car, staring out the window as buildings blurred past. Her assistant was droning on about board meetings and press interviews, but Mara didn't hear a word. She kept remembering the way he'd crouched down beside her tire like it was no big deal. The way his voice softened when he talked about his son. The way he refused her money without hesitation. No one ever turned her down, not for anything. And that smile, warm, genuine, unguarded. He said his name was Nathaniel, she murmured, almost to herself. Her assistant blinked. Ma'am. Mara shook her head. Nothing. But it wasn't nothing. She hadn't stopped thinking about him since she drove away. And for the first time in years, she didn't want to go back to her penthouse or her meetings. She wanted to go back to that gas station in nowhere. Back to him. Nathaniel tightened the last bolt on an alternator when he heard the bell above the garage door. Be right with you, he called, wiping his hands. Rowan was sitting on a crate in the corner, drawing a velociraptor with crayons. It was Saturday, and he couldn't afford a sitter. Again. Nathaniel stepped into the front office and froze. Mara stood there, wearing jeans and a soft sweater, looking completely out of place, and yet somehow perfect in the cluttered space. You're back, he said, stunned. I am, she said, stepping forward. I was passing through again. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. Mara smiled sheepishly. Okay, I made a detour. Rowan peeked around the corner. Daddy, is that the spaceship lady? Mara laughed. That must be Rowan. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Yeah, that's him. Mara crouched down to Rowan's height. I brought you something, she said, pulling a toy dinosaur from her bag. A T-Rex. I heard you like dinosaurs. Rowan's eyes lit up. Whoa, this is the coolest one ever. Nathaniel blinked. You didn't have to. I wanted to, Mara said softly, standing again. Actually, I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me tonight. Nathaniel stared at her. Dinner? Yeah, she said, suddenly nervous. You helped me, you were kind, and I haven't stopped thinking about you since. I know it's crazy, but would you? He didn't speak for a second, then he smiled. I'd love to. Mara's whole face lit up. Rowan grinned. Do I get to come too? Nathaniel laughed. Not tonight, buddy, but maybe next time. Rowan looked at Mara. Can I show you my dinosaur drawings later? Mara knelt again. Absolutely, I'd love that. As she stood, her eyes met Nathaniel's again, and something shifted. Something real. Something that felt like the first spark of something much bigger. He didn't know she was a billionaire. And she didn't care that he was just a poor dad with grease-stained hands and a kid who loved dinosaurs. All she knew was that she wanted to know him more. And this time, she wasn't driving away. Nathaniel stood at the mirror in the cramped bathroom of his apartment, holding a button-down shirt that still held creases from the last time he wore at some long-forgotten wedding where he didn't know half the guests. He brushed a hand through his hair, frowned at the reflection, then glanced toward the living room where Rowan sat on the couch, watching a nature documentary with laser focus. You think this looks okay? Nathaniel called out. Rowan looked over, eyes narrowing with the honesty only a kid could get away with. You look weird. Nathaniel sighed. Weird good or weird bad? Like a teacher on picture day. He buttoned the shirt anyway. By the time Mara's driver arrived, the sun was dipping low, casting a soft gold over the cracked pavement outside their apartment building. The car waiting out front wasn't the same Rolls-Royce. It was sleeker, darker, sharper. Nathaniel hesitated at the door for a second, then exhaled, locking up behind him. Inside the car, soft jazz played low. Mara sat on the far end of the leather seat, her legs crossed, her hair swept up in a way that made her neck look like something out of a painting. Hi, she said, smiling just enough to make his chest tighten. You sure you're not lost? He teased as he slid in beside her. Very sure, she said, her tone lighter tonight, but her eyes still watching him like she couldn't quite figure him out. The restaurant wasn't local. In fact, it wasn't even in the same county. They passed rows of darkened storefronts, winding up a cliffside road Nathaniel had never driven before. When they finally stopped, he stepped out into a world he didn't recognize: stone archways, ivy-covered walls, and a view of the city that looked like a million tiny stars scattered beneath them. Mara slipped her arm through his. "Come on, I made a reservation." "A reservation?" he echoed, glancing at the doorman who already held the door open with a practiced nod. The hostess led them through a dining room filled with high-backed chairs and low, murmured voices. He caught the scent of truffle oil and something citrusy in the air. Their table sat beside a window overlooking the lights below. A waiter appeared without being called, pouring water into crystal glasses before disappearing again. Nathaniel leaned in. "You realize, don't know what half the words on this menu mean, right?" Mara grinned, her fingers brushing the stem of her wine glass. "Then pick the one you can pronounce best. That's what I do." He chuckled. "Easy for you to say. I wasn't born eating foie gras, you know." He raised an eyebrow. "No." She shook her head. "My dad owned a corner hardware store. I stocked shelves until I was 16. That's hard to picture." "You're not the only one who can surprise people, Nathaniel." He looked at her then, really looked. Not just at the smooth line of her jaw or the way her earrings caught the candlelight, but at the way she leaned forward, unguarded, like she wasn't used to being listened to. Or maybe just not used to someone looking at her without an angle. "So how'd you go from hammers and nails to—" He gestured subtly toward the velvet seats and gold fixtures. "I built apps in college. One went viral, then a few more, then the investors came." "Just like that?" "No," she said, her smile fading into something quieter. "Not just like that. There were lawsuits, people who tried to take credit, months where I didn't sleep more than 3 hours a night. It wasn't magic. It was war." He nodded slowly. "I get that." "Yeah, I used to be headed for a different life. Thought I was going to be a mechanical engineer, had a scholarship lined up. Then Rowan happened." Her eyes softened. "You don't regret it, do you?" He shook his head without hesitation. "Not a second of it. Life just changed lanes." Silence fell for a beat, not uncomfortable, just waited. Then Mara reached across the table, her fingers resting lightly against the back of his hand. "You're not what I expected." "Neither are you." Dinner stretched into hours, courses arriving in small, artful arrangements Nathaniel barely touched. Not because they weren't good, though he still wasn't sure what half of them were, but because Mara was talking, and every word made him forget he was out of place. She told him about her brother in Switzerland, her failed piano lessons, the time she accidentally dyed her hair purple in high school. He laughed until his ribs ached as she mimicked her childhood piano teacher's accent and frowned at the memory of a press scandal she never asked for. When dessert came, a dish involving something called elderflower foam, he leaned back and studied her, his smile fading. "You ever get tired of it?" "Of what?" "All this, the gloss, the pressure, people knowing your name before you say it." Her eyes flickered. "Every single day." "Then why stay in it?" Mara hesitated. "Because I built this world with my bare hands. If I walk away, someone else takes the wheel and drives it into a wall." He nodded. "That's a good reason." "But," she asked, tilting her head, "but maybe it doesn't have to be all or nothing." She didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, she said, "You're the first person who said that to me in a very long time." Outside, the night had deepened, the stars overhead faint but visible through the haze. The driver opened the car door, but Nathaniel didn't move. "Can we walk?" he asked. Mara blinked. "Now?" "Yeah, just for a bit. I'm not ready to go home yet." She nodded and handed her clutch to the driver. They walked along the edge of the cliffside property, shoes crunching softly over gravel. The wind tugged at her hair, loosening it from its careful twist. She didn't fix it. "You know," she said, "I think came back because I wanted you to react differently." "To what?" "To me, my name, the money." "But I didn't know," he said. She looked at him. "You do now." He stopped walking, figured it out somewhere between the fifth fork and the waiter who bowed. "And I still don't want anything from you." Her breath caught in her throat. "You sure?" she asked, voice barely audible. He stepped closer. "I want to know how you take your coffee, what makes you cry during movies, what your favorite song is when no one's listening. That's what I want." Mara swallowed hard. "No one talks to me like that." "Maybe that's the problem." She didn't say anything, just took his hand and held it like it might be the only real thing she'd touched all week. When they finally returned to the car, the driver didn't speak. Nathaniel's phone buzzed once with a message from the neighbor watching Rowan, but he didn't check it right away. He looked at Mara. "You want to see something real tomorrow." "What do you mean?" He grinned. "Come to the garage. I'll show you how to rebuild an alternator. Might ruin your manicure, though." "I don't have a manicure," she said, lifting her hand. "Even better." She laughed, the sound low and real, and nodded. "I'll be there." As the car pulled away from the glittering restaurant and wound back toward the darkened roads Nathaniel knew by heart, neither of them said anything. But her hand stayed in his the whole way back. And that silence, it felt more like a beginning than an end. The next morning, just as a light drizzle began to fall, Nathaniel stood outside the open bay of his garage, tightening the last bolt on an old motorcycle he was restoring for a neighbor. He heard the unmistakable sound of tires crunching over gravel. Not the squeak of worn rubber or the hollow knock of a misaligned axle. This was precision. Engine smooth, suspension tight. He didn't look up until he heard the car door shut. Mara walked toward him, trading her heels for worn sneakers and a faded denim jacket that looked lived in but not cheap. Her hair was down this time, loose waves brushing her shoulders, already catching a few droplets of rain. "You're early," he said, wiping his hands with a cloth. "You didn't say what time to come. Figured early was better than late." He tilted his head and stepped aside, motioning toward the inside of the garage. "You're lucky I'm not a morning person. I'd have put you to work before sunrise." She glanced around as she walked in, eyes trailing over the cluttered shelves, the boxes of parts labeled in thick black marker, the dented vending machine Nathaniel had rescued from a junkyard and somehow brought back to life. "This place smells like oil and coffee." She looked at him. "I don't hate it." "High praise," he said lightly. "You want me to show you the ropes, or are you just here to look cute in grease?" "I came to get my hands dirty," she said, dropping her bag on the bench. "You promised an alternator." He pulled over a stool, handed her a pair of gloves, and placed the alternator between them on the workbench. "Ever taken one of these apart?" "I've never taken anything apart that wasn't coded." "All right then, we'll go slow." As he explained the components, she listened intently, following his lead as he guided her through each piece. Her hands were tentative at first, but she didn't shy away from the tools. When she dropped a washer and it clanged against the floor, she winced, then laughed. "You're not going to put that in some client's car after touch it, right? This one's just a spare. You can destroy it guilt-free." She leaned closer, eyebrows furrowed in concentration. "This one's rusted." "Yeah, that's what happens when water sneaks in. You can tell by the oxidation around the shaft." "Looks like rot." "Kind of is," he said. "Mechanical rot." They worked in silence for a few minutes, the kind of silence that didn't press, didn't need filling. Then Mara spoke again, quieter this time. My dad used to fix things. Radios, mostly. He'd sit at the kitchen table for hours, with wires and little screwdrivers. I never understood how he had the patience. Some people fix what they can't afford to replace, Nathaniel said, not looking up. Some people fix what they can't bear to lose. He paused, then glanced at her. Was that your dad? She didn't answer right away. He died when I was 23. I was building my second company. I missed the last call he ever made to me because I was in a pitch meeting. Nathaniel didn't say anything. He just handed her a rag and let her wipe the rust from her fingers. She accepted it with a nod, her eyes distant. After another hour, she leaned back, stretching her arms. Okay, I'm not great at this, but I think I prefer this kind of work to the kind that involves screaming shareholders. Most people do, he said, grinning. You're not bad for a first-timer. She looked proud for a second before her phone buzzed. The smile vanished. She glanced at the screen, then turned it over. It can wait. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. That doesn't happen often. Today's not about that. He hesitated. So what is today about? She looked at him, serious now. You, me, finding out if this thing between us is something real or just a break from reality. His chest tightened. I don't want to be a break. I don't want you to be either. The rain picked up outside, drumming against the metal roof. Mara stood and walked to the garage doorway, watching the water blur the street beyond. Nathaniel joined her, arms crossed. I've got a son to think about, he said quietly. I don't bring people into his life unless I know they're sticking around. She turned to him. I don't run from things, Nathaniel. I've fought for everything I've got. I can tell, he paused, but your world's different from mine. I'm not asking you to change yours, just let me be in it. He studied her for a long time. You serious about that? I wouldn't be standing here if I wasn't. He took a step closer. Then let's see what happens when your world and mine collide. For a moment, the rain was the only sound between them. Then, suddenly, the garage door jolted with a loud knock. Nathaniel frowned. No one ever uses that door. He opened it to find a man in a tailored navy coat, holding a tablet and wearing a Bluetooth earpiece like it was glued to his head. Mara Finley, the man asked, stepping past Nathaniel without waiting for permission. Mara's expression changed instantly, composed, cool, guarded. Dylan, she said with a tight nod, what are you doing here? The man ignored Nathaniel entirely. The board is in chaos. You missed 3 calls, the press is circling, and your absence is raising questions. I told you I was taking a personal day. Investors don't care about your personal days. They care about stability. Nathaniel stood still, jaw tight. Mara stepped forward. I'm not interested in having this conversation here. You don't have a choice. There's too much money riding on your next move. Nathaniel's voice was low. She said, not here. Dylan finally looked at him. And who exactly are you? Nathaniel didn't answer. He didn't have to. The way Mara stepped beside him said enough. I'll handle it, she said through gritted teeth. You can go. This isn't over, Dylan warned, then turned and left, his shoes clicking against the wet concrete. When the door shut, Mara exhaled slowly. Nathaniel didn't say anything. She turned to him. That was my head of strategy. He always talked to you like that. Only when he thinks I'm about to do something irrational. You showing up here irrational. No, she said firmly. It's the first thing I've done in weeks that feels sane. He nodded once. You need to go clean up that mess. Eventually, but not yet. She stepped toward him again, slower this time. Are you okay? Nathaniel studied her. You're under pressure, can't even imagine. All I've got are oil changes and late rent. Don't do that. Do what? Shrink yourself just because my world looks louder than yours. He didn't flinch. I just don't want to be the thing you escape to. Mara reached for his hand. Then don't be the thing I run toward. Outside, the rain began to slow. Nathaniel looked at her, every instinct telling him this woman didn't belong in his life. Every instinct, except the one that mattered most, the one that whispered she might just be the one person who could see him, not just what he lacked. He squeezed her hand. You hungry? She blinked. What? You came all this way. I make a mean grilled cheese. She laughed, the tension breaking. With real cheese or the kind that comes in plastic? Depends how fancy I want to be. I'm good either way. They walked out together, the rain now just a mist. Nathaniel didn't look back at the garage as he locked the door. He didn't need to. Something real had just begun inside it, and for once, he wasn't afraid of what came next. Nathaniel stepped back from the stove, flipping the last sandwich onto a chipped plate. The kitchen smelled like butter and cheddar, the lights above humming faintly in the quiet. Mara leaned against the counter, watching him with an amused kind of focus, like she'd never seen someone cook before, at least not like this, with a spatula that had one melted edge and a pan that had seen better decades. You're domestic, she said. He handed her a plate. I'm efficient. She took a bite, chewed, then tilted her head. Okay, you weren't exaggerating. This is actually incredible. I've had years to perfect it, he said, settling into the seat across from her at the small kitchen table. That and boxed macaroni. Her eyes moved past him to the cluttered bookshelf against the wall, overflowing with children's books, old repair manuals, and a few worn paperbacks. Do you ever have time for yourself? I get an hour after Rowan crashes, he said. Sometimes I read. Sometimes just sit and listen to the neighbors yell at each other. Mara laughed around her sandwich. Sounds peaceful. He grinned. It's a symphony. She put her food down and leaned forward. You've built something here. It may not be shiny, but it's solid. Nathaniel didn't answer right away. He laced his fingers together, elbows resting on the tabletop as he studied her. You ever think about walking away from it all? Not because it's broken, but because you want something else. Mara didn't flinch. Every week. But I've spent so long building a fortress, I don't know if I'd recognize myself outside of it. Maybe you don't need a fortress anymore. She looked at him, eyes narrowing slightly. And what do I need instead? Maybe just a front porch, somewhere you can breathe. An hour later, as the rain let up and the sky shifted from slate to soft blue, Nathaniel walked her to the car waiting out front. He opened the door, but she didn't get in. I've been thinking, she said, glancing toward the skyline in the distance. There's a charity gala next weekend. I usually go alone, but I don't want to this time. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. You want me to be your date? I want you to come with me because I want them to see what real looks like. He leaned against the frame of the car. I'm not exactly tuxedo material. You are if I buy the tux. He chuckled, low and reluctant. You're serious. Deadly, she stepped closer. And before you say it, I'm not trying to change you. I just want to walk in with someone who makes me feel grounded, even if the room is full of people trying to float. He nodded slowly. All right, I'll come, but I'm not promising I won't trip over a champagne tray. I'll catch you. He watched the car disappear down the street, then turned to go back inside. Rowan had fallen asleep on the couch, a coloring book still open beside him. Nathaniel sat down quietly, running a hand through his hair. He hadn't stepped into her world yet, but he was about to. The night of the gala arrived faster than he expected. The tux Mara had sent came in a box so perfectly wrapped he almost didn't want to open it. But he did. And when he stepped out of the bedroom, Rowan's eyes went wide. "You look like James Bond, but without the car." "I'm borrowing someone else's car tonight," Nathaniel said, adjusting the cuffs. Rowan looked impressed. "Are you gonna dance?" "Only if she makes me." She did. The moment they arrived, the flash of cameras was blinding. Nathaniel stepped out of the car first, then offered Mara his hand. She took it without hesitation, her gown trailing behind her like liquid metal, her face calm but unreadable. "Don't let go," she said under her breath as the cameras clicked. "Wasn't planning on it." Inside, the ballroom glowed with golden light. Chandeliers sparkled above an ocean of black suits and glittering dresses. Waiters walked between tables carrying silver trays of champagne flutes. A string quartet played softly in one corner, their music barely rising above the hum of polite conversation. Nathaniel tightened his jaw. He didn't belong here, but Mara's hand was still in his. They made their way through the crowd, nodding at people who clearly recognized her. A man with slicked back hair and a too-white smile approached, drink in hand. "Mara," the man said, "I was surprised to see your name on the RSVP this year." "I needed a night off." The man's eyes flicked to Nathaniel. "And who's this?" Before Mara could answer, Nathaniel offered his hand. "Nathaniel, fix things." The man blinked. "Fix things." "Cars mostly, sometimes broken assumptions." Mara bit back a smile. The man excused himself a moment later, clearly rattled. Mara turned to Nathaniel. "That was Liam. He runs a hedge fund and thinks he owns the air in every room." "I'm allergic to people like that." "Good, so am I." Dinner was served. Speeches happened. Charity goals were announced, but Nathaniel didn't hear much of it. He was watching Mara the way she navigated conversation like a chessboard, always 2 steps ahead. But when she looked at him, her expression softened. Like she didn't have to win anything here, like she already had. When the dancing started, she leaned over. "You owe me one." "I thought we agreed I'm not tuxedo or dance floor material." "Too late, you're both." She pulled him onto the floor, and the band shifted into something slower. Nathaniel rested his hand on her waist, the other clasping hers. They moved slowly, carefully, the noise of the room softening around them. "You know, I was terrified you'd say no." "To what?" "This, tonight, all of it." "Why would I?" "Because most people want what can give. You never asked for anything." He looked down at her. "That's because what I want you can't buy." She didn't look away. "Say it." He hesitated. "A real life. One where I can wake up next to someone who doesn't need fixing, just choosing." Mara's eyes shimmered. "I want that too." He tightened his grip around her waist. "Then choose it." She didn't speak. She just kissed him. In front of the cameras, the donors, the board members, and the people who'd spent months speculating about her love life. Later in the car, she leaned against his shoulder. "Come back with me," she said. "To the city." "To my place, tonight." He ran his thumb across her knuckles. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure." The penthouse was all marble and glass, but somehow it didn't feel cold. She kicked off her shoes at the door and turned to face him. "This is where I hide when I don't want to be found." He stepped inside. "Then I'm honored." She watched him walk through the space, his fingers brushing the edge of a grand piano, his eyes resting on a large framed photo of her and her father. "You miss him?" he asked. "Every day." He nodded. "I think he'd be proud." She swallowed. "He'd have liked you." Nathaniel moved to her, hands settling on her waist. I'm not going anywhere, Mara. Promise. I've got a kid who already thinks you're part of our world. I'm not going to break his heart, or yours. Weeks passed. He started bringing Rowan with him when he visited. Mara learned how to make pancakes, though she burned the first 2 batches. Nathaniel helped her replace the shower head in her guest bathroom, and she taught him how to use the espresso machine he claimed was more complicated than a carburetor. One morning, Mara stepped out of the bedroom and found Nathaniel in the kitchen, barefoot, reading a newspaper, coffee mug beside him. She stood there, arms crossed, watching him. What? He asked, sensing her stare. This, she said. This is what didn't know I needed. He folded the paper, and now. I don't want to live without it. He crossed the room and kissed her, not like something cinematic or showy, just a kiss that said I'm here. Choose you every day. Later that month, under a string of warm lights in the backyard of Nathaniel's apartment complex, with Rowan dancing between folding chairs and neighbors bringing out homemade cobbler and cornbread, Mara took Nathaniel's hand and pressed something into it. It was a key. I bought the place next door, she said. Figured we could knock down the wall. He looked at her stunned. You're serious? I don't want to take you out of your life, Nathaniel. I want to be part of it, fully. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground as she laughed. They didn't need a wedding that day. They didn't need a second proposal or a second promise. They had something better. A shared life built from a flat tire, a grilled cheese sandwich, and a choice that neither of them had expected, but both of them had been waiting for. Nathaniel stood in the middle of the gutted living room next door, staring at the exposed beams where a wall used to divide his place from what was now, officially, theirs. A thin layer of dust coated the floor, but sunlight streamed through the windows like it had never been brighter in this part of town. The scent of fresh paint still clung to the air, and the echo of hammering from earlier that morning still rang faintly in his ears. Mara stepped out from the makeshift kitchen with a roll of blueprints under one arm and a pencil tucked into her ponytail. Her cheeks were flushed, not from makeup or lighting, but from actual work. She wore jeans streaked with primer and a tank top that had a tiny rip near the hem, and Nathaniel thought she looked more stunning than she ever had in heels. I think we can open up the ceiling here if we want skylights, she said, unrolling the plans across the dining table he'd dragged in from his old space. He took a step toward her. You really want to do all that? I want to build something we both live in, not just visit. He touched her wrist lightly. You're all in, aren't you? I crossed the state line of all in weeks ago, she said, lifting her eyes to his. I'm just waiting for you to catch up. I'm not behind, he said. I've just never built a future with someone before, but if I'm doing it with anyone, I'm glad it's you. She didn't respond. She just reached into the back pocket of her jeans and handed him a small metal key. That's the mailbox, she said. It's ours now. I had it rekeyed. He turned the key over in his palm. Feels heavy. It should, she said. It holds our bills. He laughed, the kind of laugh that lived behind his ribs and took its time. You always make things feel real. That's because they are. Nathaniel leaned in and kissed her forehead before turning back to the blueprints. All right, show me where the skylights go. 3 weeks later, the space was livable. Not perfect, some baseboards were missing, and the dishwasher still made a strange clicking sound, but the walls were painted. The furniture was mismatched in the best way, and the shelves overflowed with both mechanic manuals and art books. On a Saturday morning, Nathaniel came back from the market with Rowan and found Mara sitting cross-legged on the floor, sorting through a box labeled photos in sharp, black ink. She was holding one of herself, much younger, in front of a lemonade stand with a crooked sign and a toothy grin. I forgot about this one, she said, handing it to him. He took it, studied it. You looked like trouble. I was, she said. Actually got fined for not having a permit. Rowan widened his eyes. You broke the law. Only the small ones, she said with a wink. The ones that make life more interesting. Nathaniel met her eyes. You still do that. She leaned toward him and whispered, only when I'm with the right company. That night, after dinner, Mara disappeared into the bedroom for a few minutes. When she returned, she held a thin, navy blue folder in one hand. I need to show you something, she said. He stood from the couch, brushing crumbs from his jeans. What is it? She opened the folder and pulled out a set of documents. I've been moving things, quietly. The board doesn't know yet, but I've filed to step down as CEO. Nathaniel's breath hitched. You're walking away. I'm not disappearing. I'll still be on the board, but I've appointed a successor. Someone I trust. I built that company to stand without me, and now I want to build something else. He stared at her. You did that for me. I did that for us, she said. That life was built on ambition. This life, I want it built on love. Nathaniel looked down at the papers, then at her. You don't have to prove anything to me. She stepped closer. I'm not proving anything. I'm choosing, and I'm choosing you. He pulled her into his arms, the kiss that followed quiet and deep. No cameras, no press, just the sound of a heart saying yes in the only way it could. The next morning, Nathaniel drove them out of the city. He didn't say where they were going. Mara sat in the passenger seat, sunglasses on, hair pulled back, humming softly to a country station she never admitted to liking. When they pulled into the clearing, her breath caught. Before them stood a small wooden house nestled at the edge of a lake, its dock stretching out over still water kissed by golden light. Where are we? She asked. My uncle left this place to me when he passed, Nathaniel said, stepping out and walking to her side. I've been fixing it up slowly. Thought it might be time to share it. She followed him toward the dock, the boards creaking softly under their weight. At the end, he turned to face her, holding something in his palm. I've never done this before, he said. I didn't grow up thinking I'd get to, but I've never been more sure of anything. He opened his hand. Inside was a ring. Silver, simple, with a small, square-cut diamond that caught the sun in just the right way. I don't want a big audience or a stage. I just want you here, with me, for as long as we've got. She didn't cry, she didn't need to. Her hands trembled just enough as she reached for his, voice steady and strong. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, then kissed her hand. You know this means you're stuck with me, he said. I'm counting on it. The wedding came months later. It was small, 30 people at most in the backyard of their joined homes, with string lights and a band that played blues covers, and a barbecue spread that Rowan had personally approved. Mara wore a dress that shimmered like the surface of the lake that day, her hair loose, her bouquet made of wildflowers they'd picked the morning before. Nathaniel wore a dark gray suit, no tie, sleeves rolled at the cuffs by the end of the night. Rowan stood between them during the vows, holding the rings and trying not to cry even though he absolutely did. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the neighbors, friends, and even the florist who'd crashed the party by accident echoed down the block like music. Later, when the sun had slipped behind the buildings and the band had packed up, Nathaniel and Mara danced alone on the grass, barefoot, the hem of her dress damp from dew. Think we'll make it? She asked, her head resting against his shoulder. I think we already have, he said. He pressed a kiss to her temple, and she closed her eyes. In their home, the skylight they'd argued about for weeks let in stars. The mailbox held letters with both their names on them. The garage stayed open late some nights, with Mara sitting on the workbench reading while Nathaniel closed up. The world outside kept moving fast, but inside, everything slowed down just enough to feel right. And they stayed that way together, not because they had to be, but because they'd chosen something stronger than convenience, louder than wealth, and deeper than any detour could ever take them.